grab a Bible if you have one. Turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. That's where we're going to be this morning. And I also want to just encourage you. Didn't these kids do a great job and students do a great job? Give them a shout out. Yes. It's great to see these students up here as they're helping to lead worship, as the kids were up here singing, and that's always fun for parents. And, you know, inevitably something goes wrong or one of them might jump off the stage, but none of that happened this morning, which was great. But it's always fun to see that, and we just really do believe that we have great hope in the next generation. I mentioned that last week. I mentioned it again, that, you know, you hear a lot of negative things that are out there. And we even say negative things from time to time about the next generation. But I'm telling you, if you get to know these kids, if you get to know these students, it's going to be really, really neat to see what God does with their obedience, with their just their desire to follow after Him and make a difference in this world. And so it's been a lot of fun to just be a part of that. So as part of the Next Gen, so I'm really blessed this year in particular with senior recognition. We have a senior in our house, and we've begun to celebrate just this milestone of getting through high school. And I think they have a few days left this coming week, and then they're kind of really moving towards that day where they walk across the stage and all that that means. And so it's really, really cool. And so I've really worked on this message, and I worked it with our Mother's Day message last week. But here's the thing. It's really towards those that really are a little bit younger than maybe the majority of us in the room. It doesn't mean that there's not things for everybody. There are things for everybody in this. But one of the great things that the younger generation has is they have their whole life in front of them, right? And so some of us we're looking at life in the rearview mirror kind of thing. You know, anybody want to admit that they're looking at life in the rearview mirror? It's like, or the side mirror, and it's like objects are closer than they appear. And you're like, yeah, that's for sure. And some of us, that's sort of where we are today. We're looking at that going, man, I can't believe that this is happening. Some people were asking me yesterday, like, hey, how does it feel to have a senior? And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is what we've been doing, is raising our kids up. We're excited. Yeah, it's a little bit bittersweet, but look, we got 4 other kids behind her. So it's like, hey, I don't know, what one out of the house a little bit would be okay with us. So I save on the grocery bill. But we're excited because this is the point of it, right? The point of parenting is that you're raising kids up and you're going to send them out into the world, and they're going to make a difference and they're going to make an impact. So we're excited about that for us and our family. So in the book of Ecclesiastes, right? So there's a lot of, I don't know, you read the book, it's a little bit of a downer in some spots, but he really gets to this place of really encouraging people in their life. And I hope today that what you'll look at is this life that you've been given. You have an opportunity to do something with it. And that's a big deal, whether you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, or whether you're moving towards graduating high school or college, or even if maybe you're 50, 60 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, some people are like, man, I'm just glad I woke up this morning and I have breath. And if that's you, I want to say, yes, I am with you on that. But guess what? That means that you have life in front of you today. That means that you have life in front of you as you walk throughout the day, and you can walk into that, right, with great confidence that God has great things in store for you, because He really and truly does. Ecclesiastes 11 and 12 is where we're going to kind of walk through today together. And it's interesting because as you're reading it, you might kind of go, this is a little bit puzzling. And I understand that. But the other side of it is, if you will embrace some of the truth that you find today, you'll get to that place of realizing, wait a minute, I do have life in front of me. I do have things in front of me that God wants me to do, that He has prepared for me to do, that He has worked in my heart and in my life for me to do. And so I can walk into these things. And so we're titling this message called This Life. And there's some blanks here. If you're somebody who fills in the blanks, you can find that on the app or the website. But Ecclesiastes 11 and 12 begins to talk a little bit about, like, business type of stuff, some business principles and some things along those lines, and you may not have realized that those things are in the scriptures, and you can search throughout, some in Ecclesiastes and some in Proverbs, and it's going to lay out some ways that you can kind of navigate through, like as a business owner. So some of you might be a business owner, some of you might be an aspiring business owner, and those types of things, and there's just some principles that are laid out in here, but even more so just in terms of how you live your life. And he says this, he says, send your grain across the seas, and in time profits will flow back to you. But divide your investments among many places, for you do not know what risks might lie ahead. And I don't know if any of you are paying attention, right? Maybe this is for some kids, but a lot of adults in the room, you start listening to what's happening in the economy. Anybody kind of watching that? Anybody remember what happened back in like 2007, 2008, 2009? How many of you walked through that season with some great pain? Anybody want to admit that? Like, yeah, that hurt. And so you're paying a little closer attention to some things, and he's just helping you understand, like, yeah, you don't know what lies ahead. You don't know what lies ahead. He says, when clouds are heavy, the rains come down. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. And so some people, that's the way that they look at things, right? They look at the forecast of things, whether it is like with the farmer, you're looking at the forecast of the weather, and you're going, but wait a minute. I mean, how many of you are totally prepared when you think it's going to rain? You carry an umbrella, and you're ready to roll. Anybody, that type of person? Ben's in the back. He's got his hand up, but I've seen this guy. He's walking around with an umbrella, 30% chance of rain. He's got an umbrella. I'm one of the worst prepared people when it comes to the weather. I'm horrible at it. I'll walk outside thinking it's going to be hot and it's cold. I'll walk outside and thinking that it's going to be sunshine and then it's going to rain. I mean, I don't pay attention to a lot of that stuff, which I should pay more attention to it. But the reality of it is sometimes you just don't know. But you can't get to the place in your life where you're paralyzed by the forecasts that are out there. Right? So you gotta be wise about how you're walking through those things. Just as you cannot understand the path of the wind or the mystery of a tiny baby growing in its mother's womb, so you cannot understand the activity of God who does all things. That's a big deal. It's a big deal. We talked a little bit about that last week, but it's just a reminder is you don't know what God is doing from beginning to end. But here's what we do know. We do know that when we are following after Him, even when things go a little sideways, things don't go exactly like we intend them to go, like 2007, 2008, 2009. And we're looking back, and does it hurt? Yep. But all along the way we're going, but I can see God's hand working in the middle of it all. I can see His hand working. So you just don't know. It says this, plant your seed in the morning and keep busy all afternoon, for you don't know if profit will come from one activity or another, or maybe both. So here's something I want you to consider, right? And so it's our first kind of fill in the blanks if you're somebody who wants to fill in the blanks. And it's this, life is an adventure. I told you this message is about this life. Life is an adventure. So here you go. Live by faith and enjoy the ride. Live by faith and enjoy the ride. And that may seem, some of you are like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I think it does sound like a lot of fun, right? To be able to walk by faith. The problem that most of us have in our life is that we're not doing anything in our life that requires any amount of faith. Right? We're only doing the things like we're listening to the forecast. We're listening to the weather. And so we're planning all of these things. We're planning all of these things. We're planning all of these things. And it's like, if life's not planned out and it doesn't go exactly the way that I think it should go, then I don't want anything to do with it. And some of you are like, that's me. How did he know? Because that's part of human nature, right? So when we think of walk by faith, that's really hard for us. It's really hard for us if we can't see, if we can't know, if we can't kind of look ahead and figure some things out on our own, then it's like, I don't really want to do it. But the reality of it is God is calling each and every one of us as we follow Him to follow Him with a life of faith. I've said this before, I continue to say it. What in your life today, what in your life tomorrow, when you wake up tomorrow, and you stretch and you get out of that bed and your feet hit the floor, what are you going to do with that day that requires faith? That requires faith. Is it a conversation that you need to have with someone? Is it maybe a new business venture that you need to start? Right? Is it a new ministry that you need to step into? Is it a mission trip that you need to be a part of? Is it an outreach program that you might need? Is it, hey, I'm going to figure out how to fill up this baby bottle and support a much-needed ministry in our community? That might require some faith, and you may not be able to exactly figure out how to do it, but that's okay. That's okay. Life is an adventure. And by the way, if you're living a life, to me, that's not adventurous, then you're missing out on a lot of what God has planned for you. I'll say this, and this is your next blank. It goes like this: the sweet spot, right? Anybody want to live in the sweet spot? Right? The sweet spot for living is somewhere between reckless and paralysis. Right? Right? Now, I probably err on the side of reckless. I just want to admit that. That's usually my go-to. But there's a lot of people I know that err on the side of paralysis. They're the ones that, as you look at what he was saying in Ecclesiastes, right? When the clouds are heavy, the rains come. Whether a tree falls north or south, it stays where it falls. Farmers who wait for perfect weather never plant. If they watch every cloud, they never harvest. And some of you, that's your life. You're waiting for the perfect conditions. You're waiting for everything in your life to line up just so. And you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. And guess what? It never lines up. Right? It never lines up. It's like, I remember having this conversation with my brother a long time ago. We were talking about kids. And this was when we were much younger. And I said, look, man, there's just never the right time to have children. Can I get an amen? Anybody want to echo that? Right? You as a parent, you're trying to figure it out, right? You're trying to have everything line up. I got to have this much money in the bank, and I got to have this kind of house, and I got to have all of these things. And then one day you're like, uh-oh. Right? And you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, if I have it all planned out, everything's going to go according to my plan. But then it doesn't. Right? Life is an adventure. And the sweet spot for all of us is somewhere between reckless and paralysis, right? For those of you that are like me, and maybe you err on the side of reckless just a little bit too much, right? Maybe you need to kind of take a few steps towards the middle and go, okay, I'm not going to be quite as reckless as I used to be. But some of you are sitting here and you're the ones that are paralyzed. It's paralysis by analysis. And you're analyzing everything. You're listening to the forecast. It's like you never do anything. You never take a step of faith. You never walk by faith because you're always paralyzed by it. And you need to maybe take a little nudge to the left and go, you know what? I'm gonna take a step. I'm gonna do something so that I can live in this sweet spot. Because life is an adventure. I got here this morning and I started digging through some old notes I have because there was this thing that I read, and this is years and years ago. I'll tell you how old this is. I have a file, like a paper file, not a digital file. I have a paper file of things that I've collected through the years. So much so that as I was flipping through it this morning, I found an email from my Juno email account in 1998. Anybody want to just right there lean into that with me? Right? mdeva@juno.com was my email address. You can go ahead and send something there. I don't check it. Don't even know if it's around, but you can try, right? But here, listen to what he said. He goes like this. He says, at first, I saw God as my observer, my judge, keeping track of things that I did wrong so as to know whether I merited heaven or hell when I die. That's some of you. He was out there sort of like a president. I'd recognize his picture when I saw it, but I really didn't know him. But later on, I met Christ. And it seemed as though life was rather like a bike ride at that point. But it was a tandem bike, and I noticed that Christ was in the back helping me pedal. And I don't know just when it was that he suggested we change places, but life has not been the same since. When I had control, how many control freaks are in the room, right? How many of you have the imaginary brake pedal in your car, right? and you got the steering wheel going, and you're trying to control everything that's happening in life. When I had control, I knew the way. It was rather boring, but predictable. It was the shortest distance between 2 points. But when he took the lead, he knew delightful long cuts up mountains and through rocky places at breakneck speeds, and it was all I could do to hang on. Let me just tell you a little story real quick if I can. So one time, my one set of my grandparents lived in Arkansas, right? You know where that is? It's like a state somewhere out there in the West. Arkansas might be what some of you think it's Arkansas, okay? So my brothers they were in college in Tennessee, and my dad had a brilliant idea. My dad's sitting in the room, so everybody just kind of look over at my dad, and he had this brilliant idea. And he had the brilliant idea, like, let's go through the mountains, because surely the shortest distance between Arkansas and Tennessee is a straight line. The problem is a straight line is in the mountains, right? And so that's what we did. We took this detour, and we're going through the mountains. You know what mountains are like? I mean, I'm not talking about interstate on the mountains. I'm talking about back roads of the mountains. But that's how we got from Arkansas to Tennessee one time. And by the way, we never did it again. But that's what this person is saying as they're writing this. It's like they realize when you're following Jesus, sometimes he's taking you through the mountains to get you where you need to go. But at the end, when he took the lead, we took delightful long cuts up mountains and through rocky places at breakneck speeds. It was all I could do to hang on. Even though it looked like madness, he said, pedal. I worried and was anxious and asked, where are you taking me? He laughed and didn't answer. I started to learn to trust. I forgot my boring life and entered into the adventure. And when I'd say I'm scared, he'd lean back and he would touch my hand. He took me to people with gifts that I needed, gifts of healing and acceptance and joy. They gave me gifts to take on my journey, my Lord's and mine, and we were off again. He said, give the gifts away. They're extra baggage. They're too much weight. So I did to the people that we met, and I found that my giving, when I gave, I also received, and still the burden was light. I did not trust him at first with control of my life. I thought he'd wreck it. But he knows little bike secrets. He knows how to jump to clear high rocks, and he knows how to fly to short and scary passages. And when I'm learning to shut up and pedal in the strangest places, and I'm beginning to enjoy the view and the cool breeze on my face with my delightful companion, Jesus Christ, and when I'm sure I just can't do any more, he just smiles and he says, pedal. Life is an adventure. Walk by faith, right? And enjoy the ride. Wherever he takes you, enjoy the ride. Let's pick up verse 7 of Ecclesiastes in here. Okay, so 7, we'll go through 12. We read a little bit of 12. We picked up in 12 last week. It says this, life is sweet. How pleasant to see a new day dawning. When people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of life. But let them also remember there will be many dark days. Everything still to come is meaningless, right? We're going to get to that in a minute. Young people in the room, it's wonderful to be young. Enjoy every minute of it. Do everything you want to do. Take it all in. But remember that one day you must give an account to God for everything that you do. So refuse to worry and keep your body healthy. But remember that youth with a whole life before you is meaningless until we get to the end. He goes on, don't let the excitement of youth cause you to forget your Creator. That's what we talked about last week. We were talking about, hey, remember the one who made you. Remember the one who made you. Let me give you this blank as we finish this, right? And it starts with this. It's, life is a gift. Cherish it. Life is a gift. Cherish it. I don't mean cherish it like hold on to it. Try to hold on to your life, because Jesus told us that the best way for us, right, to live life is to give it away. Don't try to hold on to it. Don't try to preserve it. You got to learn to give it away. But life is a gift, so cherish it. Lean into it. Lean into the fact that every day is new, right? We all kind of talk about the verse in Lamentations where we talk about how his mercies are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Guess what? You got up this morning and it's a new day. You got up this morning and it's different than yesterday was. And yesterday, listen, I get it. You might have failed miserably. I get it. I understand. But guess what? Today's a new day. Today's a new day. The sun came up on your day today, and you have been given another opportunity, another chance to keep following after him. So life is a gift, and cherish it. He goes on in this, right? So he goes on and he says, remember him before the light of the sun, moon and stars is dim to your old eyes, and rain clouds continually darken your sky. Remember him before your legs, the guards of your house start to tremble, and before your shoulders, the strong men stoop. We talked about that last week, right? You see, and it's so true. It's so true. We talk about it, we laugh about it, we joke about it, right? You can't do the things that you used to be able to do. I mean, there comes a point where you're just older, and I look at my son, one of my sons who's 16, and it's like he can lift things that I shouldn't lift anymore, because when I lift it, like my back goes out, and then I got to lay down for a little bit till it feels better. But that's part of what's happening in life, right? It's coming around. Now, the disappointment is that for some people, and I'm not saying there's anybody in this room, this is probably most second service people that feel this way, and that is when they get a little bit older, and they're like downers all the time about everything, right? That's nobody here. That's the people that come a little bit later. They can't even get out of bed early enough to get here. But they look at life, right, and it's a bit of a downer all the time. There's nothing good that's happening, and some of you might actually be that person. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but just think about your life. Like the way that you talk, people are listening to you, right? If you're a grandparent in the room, right, the way that you talk, your grandkids are listening to you. The way that you talk, your kids are listening to you. So be mindful of what you're saying. Don't be that person that's complaining all the time, complaining all the time, complaining all the time. And if you're that kind of a person, guess what? Man, you woke up this morning, so let's change your attitude. Let's change your outlook. Realize that, listen, you got up and God has things for you to do today. So life is a gift, and cherish it. Remember him, he says, before your teeth, your few remaining servants stop grinding before your eyes. The women looking through the windows see dimly. Remember him before the door to life's opportunities is closed. And the sound of work fades. And now you rise at the first chirping of the birds, but then all of the sounds will grow faint. Remember him before you become fearful of falling and worrying about danger in the streets, before your hair turns white like an almond tree in bloom, and you drag along without energy like a dying grasshopper, and the caperberry no longer inspires sexual desire. We'll talk about that later. Remember him before you near the grave, your everlasting home, when the mourners will weep at your funeral. Yes, remember your Creator now while you are young. That's his encouragement. So while you are young, remember your Creator. Before the silver cord of life snaps and the golden bowl is broken, don't wait until the water jar is smashed at the spring and the pulley is broken at the well. For when the dust will return to earth and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. Life is a gift, cherish it. Here's 3 things to consider along the way. One is this. Celebrate each new day. Celebrate each new day. Every day is a gift from God. Psalmist writes in Psalm, he says, teach us to number our days. Help us to pay attention. Help us to realize that we got out of bed this morning. And so let's celebrate each new day. Celebrate each new day as a new opportunity. Don't take it for granted, right? Some of us get up in the morning and we're still carrying yesterday's baggage with us. You got to realize God gave you a new day and it's in front of you, and you can lean into it and let go of what happened yesterday. You can let go of yesterday's failures, right? You can't continue to live in yesterday's successes either. Each day is a new day. And some of you are so stuck in the past. That's what you do. It's like, well, I remember when, and I remember when, and I remember when. And those things are good, but it's not what's going to take you into the new day. As you wake up each morning, it's like, let's celebrate each new day. That's the first thing. Second thing is this, and this is a tough one, but he really gets to he gets to talking about, keep your body healthy. Verse 10 of chapter 11. So refuse to worry. Keep your body healthy. Remember that youth with a whole life before you is meaningless. And here's something to consider. And I was terrible at this. Remove destructive behaviors and establish healthy habits. It's something we don't really talk about in the church, right? I mean, let's be honest. Let me just sit here for a minute. Let's just have a really honest conversation together, okay? One of the things that the church has been horrible at is talking about, choosing to live a healthy lifestyle. Like I grew up in a context, and we still, this is the way a lot of people view things, right? We talk about we don't drink, smoke, or chew, or go with girls who do, right? Like that's but that's it. That's like, this is the sum total of everything you're supposed to do in life. Don't drink, don't smoke, and don't chew, and be mindful of who you're going to spend the rest of your life with them. But we never really talk about the healthy habits. I remember having a conversation with a relative of mine. I'm not going to mention any names, but they were really hung up on the drinking thing. And I'm not getting into the drinking thing. Go read Romans 12, 13, and 14. Make the decision for yourself, okay? But I remember having this conversation with him and realizing, like, for me in my life, I'm a glutton. Like, I love food. Anybody just want to say I love food too? But we never talked about that, especially in Baptist churches. Like Baptist churches, you bring a potluck and it's just like more and more and more and more. Here, Pastor, have another helping, have another dessert. And it's like, I don't really need it, but sure. And you just kind of eat. But somewhere along the way, we've got to say, you know what? I've got to do something, because those are destructive behaviors, by the way. Right? The lifestyle that you choose to live, like, those are destructive behaviors. And some people that you hang out with, like, they're destructive behaviors. I had my basketball coach when I was in middle school and high school, like, he made us, it was a verse in 1 Corinthians, I think, 10, and it's like, bad company corrupts good morals. Did you know that? Did you know that was in the Bible? Some of you are like, I didn't know that was in the Bible. I've heard it before. It's in the Bible. Paul said it. You realize, oh, wait a minute. Sometimes it's the relationships that I keep. They're the destructive behavior. And some of you might be living in some of those right now, and it's like, you know what, I've got to walk away from that. And it's okay. It's okay for you if you need to walk away from that. But somewhere you have to say, I need to make this exchange. We were talking recently, I don't remember who it was, but a few of our staff were talking. We love the way that Paul always talks about it in Scripture, and he'll say, when you do away with this, replace it with this. Colossians 3, he does that. Romans 12, 13, and 14, he actually does that. And it's this idea of, like, if you're going to deal with this stuff, replace it with these things that are good. These things that are noble, these things that are right, as he would say in Philippians 4. And so if maybe that's for you in your life, and you're sitting there, I have some really bad habits. Maybe your habits are you need to stop drinking, smoking, and chewing. Maybe that's the habit. Maybe it's just more than that. Maybe you need to get to a place of you have a better eating habit. Maybe it's an exercise rhythm that you need to establish in your life. Like, all of those things are healthy. And if you read the Scriptures, right, this is the thing that we don't talk about. It's actually in here. Like, he's mentioning these things along the way. And as I'm growing up, like, I'm ignoring all of that stuff. That's why I look like I do. And you got to get to that place where you realize, wait a minute, I've got to remove these destructive habits, and I need to establish some healthy habits in my life. And then the third thing is this: life is a gift, cherish it. So remember the one who made you, and here it is. He's faithful. He is faithful. When you start reading the Scriptures and what he's saying here, like even when you totally blow it, right? Even when you've totally messed up, even when maybe you were a little more reckless, right? You were a little more reckless, and you're like, I was so reckless. But then you're looking back, right? Rear view mirror, and you're going, but he was so faithful. He was so faithful. He didn't necessarily deliver me from that. That's one of the things that we were singing that last song, right? We're talking about how in the middle of the storm, I'm still going to lean in, and I'm still going to worship. I'm going to sing I'm going to worship. I'm going to keep my focus on Him, right? Not asking for always the storm to go away. That's our tendency, right? But more so get into the place of asking, okay, God, what do I need to learn in the middle of the storm? What are you trying to teach me in the middle? Maybe it's the decision that got you in there. Maybe it's like you need to be a better decision maker. Okay, let's learn from that. But let's lean into the fact that God is faithful. So let's remember Him. He is faithful, right? And so let's go real quick. Ecclesiastes 12, 9 through 12. And it says this. It says, keep this in mind. The teacher was considered wise, and he taught the people everything he knew. He listened carefully to many proverbs, studying and classifying them. The teacher sought to find just the right words to express truths clearly. The words of the wise are like cattle prods, painful but helpful. Anybody got some friends like that? You got some wise friends? You got some wise friends around you, and it's like they drop something on you, you're like, oh, that hurt, but it was so good. It was so good. And that's what he's talking about, right? The words of the wise are like cattle prods. They're painful but helpful. Their collected sayings are like a nail-studded stick with which a shepherd drives the sheep. I didn't even know sheep were driven that way, did you? It doesn't sound like much fun, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you think about that, but I mean, you've got a little, this is foam, right? So if you were to take this thing and you were just how long, I just threw the end of it off. But just imagine, like, right? I mean, you can hit somebody with, don't do it, but you can hit somebody with this and you're probably not going to hurt them, right? Unless you like smacked them like across the nose or something. That might hurt a little bit. But think about a cattle prod, right? Or the sheep prod with nails sticking out. Like, you're going to use that. You're going to use that. That's painful. It's painful. He goes this, but my child, let me give you some further advice. Be careful, for writing books is endless and much study wears you out. Here it is. Ready? Last two things, and I'm going to wrap this up. It says this, life is a school. Learn your lessons. Learn your lessons. That's a tough one, isn't it? Oh. Learn your lessons. When you get to that place, right, you make those mistakes. How many of you in your life, just by show of hands, because I think it'd be fun and help us all feel better, how many of you in your life have made the same mistake more than like 3 times? Right? Life is a school. Learn your lessons. There's a movie. It's the worst movie ever, by the way. One of my boys will be here in the next service, and we joke about it. We watched it one time. It's a movie called Timmy Failure. Anybody seen this movie? Don't watch it. But he kind of narrates some things, and at one point he says, mistakes were made. Mistakes were made. And I think of life that way, right? Mistakes were made. Guess what? Yesterday, in the way that you lived your life, mistakes were made. Conversations that you had. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have said. Maybe you didn't say something and you should have said it. Mistakes were made, right? Maybe at one point you launched a business and it didn't go so well. Mistakes were made. Maybe you didn't handle your money as best as you should handle your money. Guess what? Mistakes were made. But listen, life is a school. And you have opportunity to learn lessons every day along the way. Right? And the more that you learn, like that's what I define wisdom as. My definition of wisdom, and it might be a terrible definition, but it's my definition of wisdom, and it's this. It's just the practical application of knowledge. For me, wisdom is like, when I learn something, I'm going to then apply it to my life. If I know something but I don't apply it, well, there's no wisdom in that. Right? Wisdom is I'm learning to apply. So if you've made mistakes along the way, then guess what? Learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are going to be made. Now, by show of hands, who in here has lived a life with no mistakes? Right? Like everybody's made mistakes. So let's learn from those mistakes. And then get yourself into relationships with people in such a way that you're able to speak into the mistakes that you've learned. What you've learned along the way, you can say, you know what? This is what went on with me. This is how I navigated through that. This is the mistake that I made. You know what? I mean, marriages. I know what it's like. You know, you get into a marriage, you got kids that are showing up, and all this stuff's happening, and you're busy, and, you know, you're fighting like that, and you're like, well, how do you break the cycle? How do you break that cycle? Well, you need some people that are speaking into, right, your circumstances, because life is a school, so learn your lessons. Don't keep repeating the same things over and over and over again. Here you go. Last thing. Here it is. Verses 13 and 14. I'm telling you, this is the whole, where you find meaning. So all throughout this book, the writer is talking about life is meaningless, life is meaningless, life is meaningless. And here's the point of it. Apart from God, there's no point. Apart from following him, there's no point. And so he gets to the end and he's like, here it is. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. You got to remember the guy, Solomon's writing this, and he's the wisest guy that ever lived, right? He's got all of the riches that you could ever imagine. He's got an entire kingdom at his fingertips. And what he's really concluding at the end of it all is that without God, all of that is pointless. It's through my relationship with the Creator that I find meaning in life. It's through my relationship with the Creator that my life becomes meaningful instead of meaningless. And so whatever your job is, you might think, well, I don't really like my job. I understand. I get it. But you know what? When you have a relationship with the Creator of the universe, right, He makes your job meaningful. No matter what it is. He makes your relationships meaningful, your marriage meaningful, your finances meaningful. That's what the writer of Ecclesiastes is getting to. If you want a meaningful life, if you want a full life, then it comes through your relationship with the Creator. That's the whole story. Here's my final conclusion. Fear God, obey His commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. And here it is. My last thought is you get one life. Steward it well. One life. One life. Steward, it's not necessarily a word we talk about as much anymore, but stewardship is that you're taking these things that you've been given, and then it's like, how do I manage those in a way for the glory of God? So your life, like you have spiritual gifts. It's one of the things we talk about as a church. You have some spiritual gifts. So how do you steward those? How do you manage those for the glory of God? Well, you first discover what they are, and then next put them into service in the church, because that's what He told us to do in Ephesians chapter 4. Like, use your spiritual gifts to be a part of strengthening and building up the body of Christ so that we're all moving towards maturity. Right? You have some finances, right? And some of you are like, oh, here he is talking about money. Absolutely. Let's have the conversation about your finances and your money. Are you stewarding those things well? In the home that you've been given, are you being a good steward of it? Your job, are you being a good steward of it? Because when you're following Jesus, when your relationship, right, with the King of the universe, the King and Creator of the universe, it's giving your life meaning, and it allows you to step into these things and go, you know what? I do want to steward my life well. I want to steward the relationships that I have well. I want to steward my finances well, my gifts well. I want to manage those things in a way that brings glory to God and advances His kingdom. That's what we're talking about. And the thing that scares most of us that we don't really talk about is that one day we have to stand before the Creator of the universe. And see, a lot of times we realize, like, I know one day that we're going to stand before the Creator and we have to give an account with what we did with Jesus. And I hope and I pray that everybody in this room and everybody that's watching online, like, you've made that decision where you've trusted Christ for your salvation, right? Like, you've said, you know what, yes to Jesus, I'm going to believe in Him, I'm going to follow Him, yes, yes, yes. But did you know that as a follower of Jesus, you have to stand before Him one day and He's going to go, what did you do with what you've been given? You have to give an account. How did you steward your finances? How about the gifts that you were given? How about the resources that you had at your disposal? How about the relationships that you had? How did you steward those things? You've got to say, I got to give an account for this one day. And this isn't only found in Ecclesiastes. Paul writes about this in 1 Corinthians and some other places as well. And we don't talk about it that much. But every one of us one day is going to stand before Him. And we have to say, here's what I did with what I was given. Because life is a gift. Life is a gift. And you only get one of them. So steward it well. Hey, listen, I want to pray for you, and then we're going to sing one more song. If at the end of the service you would like to talk with someone, pray with someone, we're around. We would love to be able to do that. I'll be out on the porch. Matt's at the hub there. Travis is usually down front here. We would love the chance just to talk with you, pray with you, just whatever it is that God's placing on your heart. If you're in a place today, and maybe you've never made the decision to trust Christ, like you've never said yes to him, you've never chosen to believe in and follow Jesus, we would love the chance to talk with you about that. So grab one of us after the service and let's have a conversation around that. Would you stand with me? I'm going to pray, and then we're going to sing as we close our time together. Father, thank you for your word. Lord, I think of what the writer said in Ecclesiastes, how sometimes the words are the words are painful. The correction is painful, but God, it's good for us. And so, Lord, I pray for each and every one of us in this room that we would look at our life a little bit differently. That tomorrow when we wake up, that we would celebrate the day, that we would steward the day and steward the life that you've given us. Lord, for your glory and our good. And it's in Jesus' precious, beautiful name we pray. Amen. Let's sing together.